what I would like to do now is introduce our next speaker. Anna Maria Reodica, she's at Meralco, and she's assumed her role as the program manager for the newly created Renewables Programme Office in April of 2015. The new assignment involves developing strategy roadmap of the company and addressing the challenges of integrating renewables into the distribution network. Prior to that, she was a specialist in the Utility Economics Division, handling policy regarding research and advocacy on a whole range of related issues. She's played an important part in the rulemaking for the Philippines net metering policy, and she's been a prominent figure in discussions on net metering. Her career spans 3 decades, covering a whole wide range of the relevant, what I call the sort of the family of utility rate design, demand response, energy efficiency, renewable energy integration, small grids, climate change mitigation. It's quite a lot. Maria, why don't you come up and, Anna Maria, come up and have a talk.
Thank you, Mike, for that kind introduction. And also thank you for giving a bit of a discussion on Meralco's price movements as a prelude to this presentation. So good afternoon, distinguished guests and my colleagues from Meralco. Today, I'll be discussing net metering, which is actually usually associated with solar rooftop systems, but it is not actually limited to rooftop. In general terms, net metering is distributed generation at the retail level. So for this presentation, I will walk you through Meralco's journey from transitioning from policy to implementation. Thank you. So my outline for this afternoon, a quick review of the Renewable Energy Act of 2008, with focusing on net metering policy and Meralco's experience in implementing the net metering scheme, our lessons learned so far, and sharing our challenges and recommendations, and finally, way forward. Briefly, I'll give you a review of the Renewable Energy Act of 2008. Which one? Sorry for that. Sorry. So the Renewable Energy Act took effect in 2009, and it actually took 20 years for that law to be enacted. And essentially, it is for the promotion and development of renewable energy resources in the Philippines. So among the policy mechanisms under the Act, it was net metering that was implemented first after 4 years of the RE law. We know that there are 4 policy mechanisms under the Renewable Energy Act: the RPS, or the Renewable Portfolio Standards, feed-in tariff, net metering, and the green energy options. So they would say that the RE law in the Philippines is one of the most comprehensive legislation for renewable energy. As a distribution utility, we have the mandate of accommodating distributed generation into our system and accommodating them as priority connections. But we need to balance this against responsible generation, which means affordability for our consumers, as well as reliable distribution or maintaining a robust network to accommodate renewables into our system. So let's discuss now in focus net metering policy. As mentioned earlier, it was promulgated in 2013. So from day one of its effectivity, Meralco was prepared to accept applications for net metering. And in fact, Meralco connected the first net metering customer in the country in 2013. And the scope of net metering is not limited to solar, as I have mentioned earlier, as long as it can be located in your customer premises. Renewable net metering is applicable for wind, solar, and biomass, and it's applicable to all end users. When initially it was considered or thought of as only applying to residential. And what is unique with the Philippine net metering policy is that the export energy is paid at the wholesale price or the average blended generation cost, which is actually unique and different from the other mechanisms in other countries like Germany, Australia, and US, where they are paid at full retail prices. This is the net metering framework for net metering. If you will notice, the flow of electricity comes from the generation source of the customer going to the load, and if there is any excess, it will be exported or delivered back to the distribution utility. So we follow the path of the green arrow. And of course, customers still continue to buy power from the distribution utility. So power flow in both directions. So this is a new landscape for the industry, where the distribution utility like Meralco plays an important role of providing the highway for a two-way flow of electricity. So it's a changing landscape and something new to the industry. So to be able to capture this two-way flow of electricity, the setup is actually a 2-meter setup. It could either be a 2-meter setup or a single bidirectional meter that could read both directions of flow of power. This is the standard setup, a 2-meter unidirectional, where one reads the import or the delivery of power from the distribution utility to the customer, and the lower meter or the export meter will read any excess power generated by the customer and feeds back to the distribution utility network. But in some cases, especially for big installations, the utility has the option to put up a single bidirectional meter, but capable of capturing 2-meter readings. So these are, in summary, the basic aspects of net metering. We have a two-way connection to the grid, and it is an on-site consumer-based generation. And the customer is billed for his net electricity consumption or whatever remains after the deduction. So it's kilowatt hour consumed minus his own generation and whatever exported energy. So this is a graphical illustration of how net metering works in the Philippines. So at night time, because assuming there's still no battery storage, energy storage for this system, the customer still buys power from the distribution utility at night because there is no solar generation. So whatever energy that is bought by the customer is captured by the export meter. And during daytime, when solar generation is available, it is first consumed by the load of the customer, and if there is any excess, it will flow back to the lines and read by the export meter. And the monthly billing will be based on the meter readings of the 2 meters and computed with a reduced amount of exported energy. So in preparing for implementing net metering for our customers, we have a pilot project in the compound, which is a 6.16 kilowatt solar PV system, which actually represents a typical size of a residential installation for our customers. So it is a technical test bed for Meralco in a controlled environment. So we would like to gain a level of confidence so that when we implement net metering to our customers, we avoid any surprises or disturbances. So it is essentially a test bed for Meralco in a controlled environment and a proof of concept for a first net metering installation in the country. So what have been our learnings for this net metering pilot project? First, we realized that it is a grid-tied technology, so it operates in parallel with the DU system. So it must conform to the interconnection standards of the DU system while it is connected to the distribution network. And grid form compatibility, because inverters are introduced into the system, and it is the heart and the brain of the system, so the system parameters should match the utilities system parameters. And one of the controversial distribution impact study, we have designed our application process that each application should go through a distribution impact study to assess the technical feasibility of each interconnection at the existing distribution feeder. And finally, because although you may say that the solar PV system is a small generation, but it's still a generation connected to our system that should actually go to a commissioning test. So a consumer is now considered both as a load user as well as a generation source. So we are very careful in the interconnection, in the application, in the processes for accommodating net metering customers to our system. To give you an overview of the process, this goes from the application process, from the receipt of the application, evaluation, which is actually a technical study, design of interconnection facilities, approval of facilities, and project agreement. Even if a customer is existing, we have to revise the contract because the customer now has a generating facility operating in his premises, so he is no longer considered just a load, but as well as a consumer producing his own power. And finally, the commissioning test. So this is a summary of the application process. From Meralco's experience, we are proud that we connected the first net metering customer in November of 2013. And from 2013, it was a slow pickup, but recently, in the past few months, it is a increasing trend and moving towards an exponential growth of applications. So far, as of May 2015, we have officially connected 104 net metering customers. And in the pipeline are more than 100. So in the next month or two, we expect doubling or tripling of these net metering customers. And as I may say, this doesn't capture what we call as guerrilla installations in the in the franchise. So we are becoming aware that there are more installations of solar rooftop in our franchise area that do not inform the distribution utility. And as a breakdown of these customers, we thought that it would only be residential customers putting up solar PV, and recently we have experienced even commercial and industrial customers putting up solar PV. So the breakdown is 91 and 13, and the capacity for an average residential is 5 kilowatts. And we are also surprised to see that net metering customers are scattered around our franchise area as far as north in Pampanga and south in Batangas. But the concentration is in Quezon City and in the south, Ayala Alabang in particular, and high-end villages. So we see a dispersed location of net metering customers in our franchise. So way forward, I'd like to stress the challenges we have encountered. It wasn't easy for Meralco to implement net metering. There are a lot of bumps along the road. And we have, so far, we have identified these challenges. First is the integration issues of distributed generation, because net metering is distributed generation on the small scale. So the technical aspect of integration. So we are now assessing the power flow at both directions, because if there is a concentration in a certain feeder, it could introduce voltage problems. So we have to define the technical process of accommodating these net metering customers, and also establishing a hosting capacity or penetration limits. With that, we believe that we need infrastructure upgrades to ensure a reliable network. Aside from technical, we also recognize the commercial processes that we need to establish. Application process, not only at the net metering scale, but even beyond the net metering scale, because we have been receiving applications for solar PV system, not only at the limit of 100 kilowatt, but as well as more than 100 kilowatt capacity. And we also recognize the need for internal capacity building, not only for our frontline offices and the offices involved in the process, but as well as all employees, even the security guards at our business center offices. Other challenges include an important challenge that we also recognize is the distribution utility revenue integrity. We are experiencing declining kilowatt hour sales because of the end-use generation at the customer side. So with this increasing sales volume, we have a revenue drop. But we still have to maintain the fixed asset or the network to serve these customers during their peak load requirements, especially at night. So we advocate a tariff regulatory reforms in terms of tariff redesign, maybe defining new customer segment to avoid that spiral experience in other countries, or the second dinosaur, the possibility of a second dinosaur in the distribution network. In terms of operational implications, we are aware of the intermittent nature of variable renewable energy. So it requires dispatch protocol and sourcing strategy. When VRE gets to a high penetration level, we need to shift from the conventional generation sources to the more flexible generation types. Other challenges, not only for the DU, I'd like also to share the challenges that we have identified for the industry. It's about capacity building, especially for the customers on the right sizing and a proper selection of system components, as well as for the local government units for the building permits, because these are modification in the electrical plan, so that our LGU should also be familiar with the solar PV system. And of course, with the growing number of suppliers in the market, we need accreditation not only for the suppliers, as well as for the certification of system components. And a very important one, I hope ERC, a regulatory representative, is present here for the need for regulatory reforms, the recognition of lost sales volume for the DU, a tariff redesign, and alternative ways of recovery for the universal charges. Because with less sales from our customer, there are also less contributors for the universal charges, which include environmental, missionary electrification, and the FIT-all. So the remaining grid users are burdened with the increasing subsidy for these universal charges. And finally, way forward, we see the main drivers for the increased adoption of solar, declining system price, changing demands and preferences of our customers. We cannot prevent customers putting up solar PV. It's the new trend, it's a phenomenon, and also the green initiative towards renewable or sustainable energy. And finally, addressing the challenges, we need to assess the adoption rate to be able to plan better and perhaps adopt smart grid tools as a tool to address these challenges and gain regulatory recognition. In summary, we need to address grid integration issues, network upgrades, tariff review for a grid stability. And thank you. And as a final message, I would like to quote from Charles Darwin: "It is not the strongest of the species that survives or the most intelligent, but the one most adaptable to change." So we're entering a new regime, a very challenging landscape, and we need to embrace so that we emerge as winner at the end. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.